Welcome to the debate. Our topic today sits at a really fascinating cross-section of, ancient philosophy and modern psychology. We're looking at material that explains how applying Stoic principles, self-mastery, inner strength, having a purpose, can actually become key drivers of attraction, often by leveraging what the source text calls hidden psychological triggers.
Yeah, it's compelling stuff because it takes these timeless virtues and sort of frames them for a very specific modern goal, relationship dynamics. And the tension in it, the thing we need to unpack today, I think, is really about the intent. Why are these virtues being applied?
Exactly. The core question is this: are the self-mastery principles described like emotional certainty, controlling desire, prioritizing purpose, are they pursued fundamentally for genuine internal development, for balanced independence, or are they primarily effective because they actually function as strategic triggers, leveraging, subconscious vulnerabilities simply to maximize attraction?
And I'm going to argue that while the behaviors look stoic on the surface, the material consistently presents their application as, strategic levers. Tools intended to exploit inherent psychological patterns, making the main focus external outcome control.
And I'll be arguing that these behaviors are in fact authentic, principled manifestations of self-mastery. Attraction is a powerful side effect, maybe even inevitable, but it's ultimately secondary to achieving genuine inner strength.
Okay, let's dig into those positions then.
Right. So my core thesis is really anchored in the Stoic idea of prohairesis, that internal moral choice, the judgment faculty that only we truly control. Attraction, therefore, has to be the natural result of cultivating that internal stability. The material highlights, for instance, the power of emotional certainty. Now, remaining emotionally unshaken, calm in chaos, that's not a tactic. That is the ultimate expression of internal regulation. A man who handles challenges with quiet confidence, who isn't constantly seeking external validation or, panicking under pressure, he naturally signals strength. This stability makes him a kind of safe haven. I see this as emotional maturity, plain and simple, not manipulation. The attraction is just the logical response to seeing competence and stability.
Okay, I see that. And I agree, competence and stability are virtues, no question. However, the framework, it constantly seems to redirect the reader's focus away from the internal virtue towards the external effect, specifically targeting what it calls a hidden weakness, that deep human need for emotional certainty. My position is that the goal here is outcome control. And the clearest example, I think, is the idea that women are drawn to what they can't have. This requires the man to actively manufacture distance and mystery, and it explicitly says avoid being too available. Now, if the pursuit was purely genuine independence, rooted in self-mastery, wouldn't he just allocate his time according to his praetheresis, his purpose, without this deliberate concern for generating mystery or scarcity? The material dictates that scarcity itself is the trigger.
But a commitment to being a man with a mission is the ultimate prioritization of the internal, of purpose. When a man is driven by something larger than himself, a craft, a goal, he naturally allocates his time and emotional energy accordingly. That discipline ensures that external urges or the desire for validation don't dictate his actions. The independence is real. The attraction follows because, true independence is inherently rare and valuable. That prioritization is foundational. Stoicism controlling one's desires leads to choice, not neediness.
I find that interpretation maybe a bit too charitable, because the discussion of purpose is almost always coupled with this requirement that the woman must never feel like she's the absolute center of his world. That framing immediately sets up a dynamic where his purpose is used, perhaps strategically, to establish a kind of hierarchical value, making her feel like she has to work to maintain her position. Let's move into the core debate then, maybe starting with this difference between principled emotional control and calculated indifference. You defined emotional certainty as responding at one's own pace. Okay, but what about the instruction to be hard to read? The material suggests that being overly expressive or instantly available makes a man too easy, effectively stopping the pursuit. If the motivation was purely self-mastery, why would he need to worry about the woman stopping the chase?
This is where I think the strategic intent really shows itself. While calmness is stoic, sure, the application of being hard to read feels like a deliberate tactic. It's about maintaining mystery, unpredictability. It's managing the flow of information to create psychological investment. The moment you're fully predictable, in this framework, you're somehow less valuable. The goal isn't just internal non-attachment, it seems to be the external effect of keeping her emotionally guessing, invested in figuring you out.
Well, I see why you characterize it that way, but I believe this might be a misunderstanding of what genuine non-attachment actually looks like in social dynamics. The man who is instantly available, overly expressive, he's arguably violating his own inner timetable. He's letting external expectations dictate his actions. That's a failure of self-discipline. Maintaining a calm reserve being hard to read is simply non-attachment to her immediate emotional state or demands. It removes that debilitating feeling of neediness. The man's focus stays on his virtue, not her pursuit. If she stops chasing, well, that's an external outcome he has to accept, according to Stoic principles.
The problem, though, is the material instructs him to engineer the distance needed to keep the chase going. Let's look at the willingness to walk away. You rightly framed this earlier as essential self-respect. Communicating his self-worth isn't dependent on her validation. A noble principle, absolutely.
And standing firm during tests of strength is just a necessary defense of that internal value. I mean, if a man caves under pressure or gets overly emotional, he sacrifices the very self-respect he's trying to build, right?
Undeniably true. Yet, the advice that comes with it shifts the intent, drastically, I'd say. The material explicitly states that walking away triggers a woman's deepest fear of loss. It's framed as the key to enhancing his perceived value. Now, that isn't just principled non-attachment anymore. This feels much more like a form of calculated behavioral economics applied to attention and attraction.
But I'm not entirely convinced by that analysis. If a man acts from virtue, say, upholding a clear boundary, and that action incidentally triggers a powerful psychological effect, does that automatically negate the virtue of the act itself? The Stoic's concern is the quality of his choice, his prohairesis. If he chooses self-respect, that choice is morally sound, regardless of whether she responds with fear or attraction, isn't it?
The critical difference, I think, lies in the awareness and the intent. The material doesn't just describe the effect, it advises the man to use the action precisely to provoke that effect. When we talk about calculated behavioral economics, we mean the strategic manipulation of perceived supply and demand. By creating a credible threat of loss, which is a form of scarcity, the man dramatically increases the perceived value of his attention, his availability. This turns self-respect from a personal virtue into, well, a powerful tool for psychological leverage. The focus shifts to the efficacy of the trigger, not just the purity of the principle behind it.
Okay, but the man must first have that high value before the threat of loss could even be effective, surely. He can't just fake the purpose or the inner calm required to credibly walk away. The internal transformation has to happen first. So, therefore, the internal strength remains the foundation. The psychological trigger is merely the consequence of high internal value meeting a fear of loss.
Agreed. The internal strength is the necessary precondition, definitely. But the operational manual, let's call it, seems focused on the application that maximizes the psychological return, which brings us to the paradox of controlled vulnerability. The material advises sharing struggles, but only after they've been conquered. Revealing details gradually, this is presented as maintaining strength and presence.
Well, isn't that timing simply wisdom, emotional maturity? I mean, oversharing, complaining, constantly seeking emotional validation, that is the definition of neediness. It's a fundamental failure of emotional control. The Stoic handles what's internal before projecting it externally. By revealing his inner world on his own terms, The man maintains his autonomy and ensures he isn't, forcing the woman into some unwanted dominant or maternal role.
Yeah, but I'd suggest the control is designed not merely to avoid neediness, but to engineer a high-value reveal. The vulnerability is timed, it's curated, specifically to make the woman feel uniquely special when he chooses to open up. This maximizes the emotional impact on her perception. He presents a curated persona the inner struggles are shared only once they're part of its established narrative of competence, of conquest. That doesn't feel like spontaneous emotional authenticity. It feels like a sophisticated strategy for maximizing his presence.
Look, no relationship can thrive on complete spontaneity without any structure. If a man shares his deepest vulnerabilities immediately, he's essentially asking the woman to manage his emotions, which completely reverses the stability he's meant to provide. Delaying the revelation until he has conquered the struggle is actually a sign of respect for himself, for his mission, and for the emotional burden he chooses not to place prematurely on his partner. It demonstrates his autonomy is intact.
Autonomy is key, yes, but the framework seems to use that autonomy as a delivery mechanism. The overall structure, from creating scarcity, drawn to what they can't have, to leveraging boundaries, walk away, to the controlled timing of revelation, it consistently suggests a systematic approach focused squarely on external perception and outcome. These powerful Stoic adjacent principles feel like they're being leveraged primarily as keys to unlocking specific emotional vulnerabilities.
We have to remember, though, that cultivating calmness, purpose, self-discipline, this requires profound internal transformation, regardless of the outcome. These qualities inevitably make a man more attractive because they signal stability, competence. So while the material analyzes these traits in terms of their effectiveness in attraction, the true enduring value derived is the self-respect and inner strength gained along the way.
I concur that the transformation has to occur. That's fundamental. However, we have to remain critical of the framing. When the strategy focuses so heavily on triggering subconscious reactions, leveraging fear, managing scarcity, the primary utility seems to shift. The question the material often emphasizes feels like, how do I apply this strength to achieve the desired psychological effect, rather than purely, how do I become a better man?
Ultimately, both paths, whether focused internally or externally, demand extreme discipline. The man committed to self-mastery likely achieves both the inner peace and the outer attractiveness.
Agreed. And the material certainly offers a valuable, if provocative, exploration into the psychology of attraction. It forces us to really explore that critical difference between internal self-mastery and, external strategic leverage. It leaves listeners, I think, to discern where the emphasis truly lies, or perhaps where it should lie, on unwavering personal growth or on the calculated psychological effect these virtues can generate.